There are places inside you that no map will show. Not the kind of places you visit, but the ones that visit you. They come at night, between thoughts, between breaths, when the noise finally fades and something inside whispers, "Don't open that door." But you look anyway, because part of you needs to know what's behind it. Carl Jung once wrote that the meeting with the self is at once the meeting with one's own shadow. He wasn't talking about some external darkness, but the landscape of the unconscious mind, a vast terrain of symbols, archetypes, forgotten dreams, and repressed emotii. ONS. Jungian psychology teaches that every door in that inner corridor leads somewhere real, not in the physical sense, but in the architecture of the psyche itself. The first time you stand there, it feels like a dream. Maybe you're standing in front of a hallway that looks like your old school, or a house you half remember from childhood. The walls breathe, the lights flicker. You sense something ancient about it, familiar and strange at the same time. That's not imagination. That's your unconscious mind using symbols to communicate. The same way dreams do when they turn your pain into metaphors and your memories into myths. This is where depth psychology begins, at the threshold between light and darkness, between persona and shadow. You might think you're in control, but the truth is, it's the psyche that's been observing you all along. Every fear you've denied, every wound you've avoided, every pattern that keeps repeating, it's all stored there, behind invisible doors. And each of those rooms, as Jung suggested, holds both danger and salvation. When you enter without awareness, you drown. When you enter with consciousness, you transform. That's the secret behind shadow work and inner alchemy, learning to face what you've buried without letting it consume you. You see, the human psyche is not a straight line. It's a labyrinth. Every time you open a door, you walk into a new fragment of yourself. One door leads to the repressed self, another to the false persona, another to the wounded child still waiting to be seen. The meaning of life, in Jungian terms, is not found outside these walls. It's found within them, in confronting the very things you fear most. Some doors will seduce you with light. Others will whisper promises of comfort. But a few will destroy you if you step in unprepared. Those are the rooms we are about to explore. The rooms that Jung would have warned you about. The psychological spaces that can tear apart your mind if entered unconsciously. This is not just theory. It's a map of the human condition. A journey through symbols and meaning, through projection and perception, through the alchemy of trauma that turns pain into awareness. And by the end, you'll understand why the power of the mind lies not in avoiding darkness, but in learning to walk through it, one door at a time. So take a deep breath. We are going to open 7 doors together. But remember, not every door deserves to be opened. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is the noise. It's faint at first, whispers, footsteps, the soft click of distant doors. Then you realize the sound isn't coming from the hallway. It's coming from mirrors, dozens of them, lining the walls, stretching endlessly, each one reflecting a version of you, thinner, smarter, happier, more loved. 1,000 versions, all watching, all silently competing for your approval. This is the room of comparison, one of the most dangerous chambers in the architecture of the human psyche. It's where the persona, the mask you wear to be accepted, becomes louder than the self that created it. Jungian psychology describes this as a fracture between your conscious identity and the collective unconscious. You begin to borrow your worth from others, measuring your light against their shadow. Every scroll through social media, every glance at someone else's success, feeds this room. You start believing that your value depends on visibility, that the mirror's reflection matters more than the unseen depth behind it. This is how projection and perception begin their silent war. You project your disowned qualities, strength, beauty, talent, onto others, and then feel small in their presence. But in truth, you're not seeing them. You're seeing the repressed self, the part of you you've refused to claim. In Jung's depth psychology, comparison is a form of shadow projection. When you envy someone, your psyche is trying to tell you, this quality belongs to you too, but you've buried it. That's the paradox of envy. It doesn't reveal what you lack, it reveals what you've denied. The danger of this room is subtle. It doesn't destroy you violently, it drains you quietly. Each comparison becomes a small cut to the soul. You lose touch with your inner transformation, your individuation process, your connection to the unconscious mind. You forget that your path, your hero's journey, was never meant to look like anyone else's. To leave this room, you must shatter the mirrors, not with rage, but with awareness. You look at each reflection and say, this is not me, this is a symbol. And suddenly, the glass stops judging. It starts teaching. Because true self-awareness begins when you stop competing with your own projections and start listening to your inner voice of the self, the one whispering that you were never meant to be anyone but you. The air is heavier here. You feel it pressing against your skin, thick, metallic, charged with something unsaid. It's the kind of silence that hums like electricity before a storm. And you realize this isn't just a room, it's a container. A vault built to hold everything you refuse to feel. This is the room of repressed anger, where emotion becomes sediment. Carl Jung believed that what we suppress doesn't disappear, it descends. It sinks into the unconscious mind, changing shape, gaining weight, waiting for a crack in your composure to escape. You tell yourself you're calm, that you've moved on, that forgiveness is strength. But beneath that calmness lies an ocean of heat, the unspoken truth that every act of forced peace leaves behind a wound that never quite closes. In Jungian psychology, this kind of repression is the perfect breeding ground for the shadow. When anger isn't expressed, it mutates. It becomes cynicism, resentment, passive aggression. It turns your smile into armor and your empathy into exhaustion. It's why some people seem kind but feel hollow. They've built their persona entirely out of suppression. And yet, Jung warned that the shadow, if ignored, always seeks expression, through slips of the tongue, emotional explosions, or illness itself. You start noticing it in yourself, the tremor in your hands, the shallow breath when someone crosses a line. You say nothing, but your body remembers. The collective unconscious stores it too, entire generations of unspoken rage, especially in those taught that good people don't get angry. But anger is not evil. It's a compass, a boundary alarm, a force of inner alchemy that, if integrated consciously, becomes clarity and courage. To practice shadow work here is to sit with the flame instead of fearing it. You don't let it burn others, and you don't swallow it either. You observe it. You trace its roots: humiliation, betrayal, abandonment, injustice. You realize that anger is not against the world. It's a cry for self-respect from the wounded healer inside you. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this is one of those moments, when the light isn't gentle, but fierce. When you learn that the path of emotional alchemy isn't about extinguishing the fire within, but transforming it, turning poison into power, silence into truth, and pain into inner transformation. You walk out of this room lighter, but stronger. You don't fear your anger anymore. You've met it, named it, and now it walks beside you as awareness. You enter this room expecting calm. At first, it seems quiet, walls covered with books, notes pinned to every corner, clocks ticking softly in unison. But after a few seconds, the noise starts to grow. It's not sound, it's thought. Thousands of overlapping voices whispering possibilities, plans, predictions, regrets. They echo like restless ghosts that never sleep. This is the room of endless thinking, where logic becomes a labyrinth. Here, the unconscious mind hides behind reason, pretending to help while slowly consuming your peace. Carl Jung described this state as inflation of consciousness, when the ego believes it can control reality through thinking alone. It's the illusion that more analysis means more safety. But in truth, it's a form of fear, a desperate attempt to silence the unknown by naming it. The irony? The more you think, the less you know. Each thought spawns another. Each answer gives birth to new questions. It feels like progress, but it's paralysis disguised as productivity. You replay every mistake, every conversation, every imagined future. You rewrite what already happened, trying to outsmart fate itself. That's how anxiety wears the mask of control. In depth psychology, this is the ego's rebellion against surrender, the refusal to trust the natural intelligence of the human psyche. You mistake mental noise for awareness, but what you're really doing is resisting stillness. Because in stillness, the unconscious begins to speak, through intuition, dreams, symbols, and meaning, and the quiet voice of the self. Jung believed that true individuation requires a descent into that silence, a moment when thought collapses and something deeper awakens. It's the beginning of spiritual awakening, the shift from intellectual control to inner transformation. You stop chasing clarity and start allowing it to find you. To leave this room, you must stop arguing with your own mind. You must dare to sit in the void, without solving, fixing, or naming. Let the ticking clocks melt into background noise. Let the pages fall from the walls. And when the last thought dissolves, you'll hear something softer beneath the chaos. A faint pulse, the rhythm of consciousness itself, reminding you that wisdom doesn't come from thinking harder, but from feeling deeper. That's the hidden truth behind Jungian psychology. The mind is a tool, not a throne. And when you stop trying to control it, you finally meet the vast, still presence that has been guiding you all along. The quiet, knowing awareness that doesn't think, but understands. The moment you step inside, everything gleams. Polished marble floors, golden light spilling through tall windows, the scent of control in the air. It feels perfect, until you realize it's too perfect. There's no dust, no breath, no chaos. Only silence dressed as order. This is the room of the false self, where the persona has become the jailer. Carl Jung described the persona as the mask we wear to function in society, a necessary bridge between the conscious self and the collective unconscious. But when the mask fuses to your skin, you forget there was ever a face beneath it. The walls here are lined with framed certificates, achievements, compliments, identities carefully curated for approval. You can almost hear the whispers of validation. You're doing great. You're what everyone needs you to be. But behind that applause, there's another voice, faint but familiar, the one you've been ignoring. The repressed self, begging to be real again. Perfection, Jung warned, is often a symptom of disconnection from the unconscious mind. The more you polish your surface, the more you exile your rawness, the parts that make you human, imperfection, desire, vulnerability, fear. That's the paradox of this room. It looks like success, but it feels like suffocation. Many who live here suffer quietly under the illusion of control. They appear composed, but their shadow trembles just beneath the surface. In Jungian terms, this imbalance between the persona and shadow creates psychic tension. The soul splits into the image you perform and the truth you conceal. It's the root of burnout, imposter syndrome, even spiritual numbness, what Jung called the loss of meaning in modern life. You can't heal in a mirror that only reflects perfection. You can only heal in the presence of truth. That's why shadow work begins by removing the mask, layer by layer, until your reflection finally breathes again. You realize that this relentless chase for flawlessness wasn't driven by ambition, but by fear, the fear of being seen as you are. And in that recognition, the walls begin to crack. This room isn't evil, it's a test. It asks, can you love yourself without the costume? Because individuation, the essence of Jungian psychology, isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. True inner alchemy doesn't polish the surface. It embraces the cracks, turning shame into authenticity and illusion into self-awareness. When you leave this room, you carry something lighter than perfection, your own presence. And for the first time, that's enough. The door creaks open, and a familiar scent rushes out. Not perfume, not smoke, but something older. It smells like a childhood room left untouched. Old paper, dust, the faint sweetness of nostalgia mixed with the ache of something you thought you'd forgotten. This is the room of unhealed memories, and it doesn't lie. Here, time folds in on itself. The air hums with echoes of voices that once called your name. Teachers, parents, strangers, lovers, all still speaking inside your unconscious mind. You see fragments everywhere, a broken toy, a letter never sent, a door that never opened. Every object here is a symbol, and every symbol carries meaning. According to Jungian psychology, these are not just memories, they are living archetypes, patterns of experience that shape your emotional reality. The inner child still lives here, hiding behind locked drawers and fading wallpaper. And if you listen closely, you'll hear them, that small version of you asking the same question they always did. Am I safe yet? The truth is, you never really left this place. You just learned to build over it. New jobs, new relationships, new distractions, but the foundation never healed. And so, the wounded healer inside you keeps returning, again and again, through recurring pain, familiar disappointments, and the haunting repetition of old stories. This is what Jung called the repetition compulsion of the psyche, the way unhealed wounds recreate the past until they are finally seen. Sometimes the past visits you through dream interpretation, your unconscious replaying the same symbols until you understand them. The locked house, the forgotten classroom, the childhood street that keeps reappearing. These are not dreams of nostalgia. They are messages, the collective unconscious urging you to reclaim what was left behind. The hardest part of this room is that it hurts beautifully. You remember moments of innocence, laughter, touch, and right next to them, moments of fear, abandonment, and confusion. Jung wrote that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is what he meant. Healing isn't about escaping the past. It's about holding it without letting it drown you. To leave this room, you must walk toward the smallest version of yourself and kneel. You listen to their story. You stop correcting their memory. And then you whisper, "You did nothing wrong." The walls soften. The air warms. The scent changes, no longer stale, but alive. Because when you embrace your inner child, you don't just heal the past, you rewrite the present. That is inner alchemy at its purest form, turning memory into freedom, pain into compassion, and time itself into awareness. You open this door and are met with silence, not the gentle kind, but the heavy silence that hums after something sacred has been forgotten. The room feels vast and hollow, like an abandoned cathedral. Dust floats through pale light, and the echo of your footsteps sounds almost intrusive, as if you're walking through the ruins of your own belief. This is the room of spiritual emptiness, where meaning dissolves into motion and everything you once trusted begins to fade. Carl Jung saw this place as inevitable, the desert of the individuation process, when the old gods die and the psyche begins to outgrow its borrowed truths. He called it the night sea journey, the dark stage before inner transformation, where the unconscious mind begins to dismantle your illusions of purpose. At first, you try to fill the void, with work, with pleasure, with people, with noise. But nothing stays. Every distraction evaporates like smoke. That's because this emptiness isn't a punishment, it's a purge. The soul clears space for something deeper, but only if you stop running from the quiet. In depth psychology, this emptiness signals that your old archetype has completed its cycle. The hero you've been playing, ambitious, controlled, rational, no longer fits. The collective unconscious is calling for a new pattern, one that honors both light and darkness, both spirit and shadow. But to hear that call, you must first endure the silence. You start to notice how the noise of the world, the constant scrolling, the opinions, the expectations, has become a substitute for faith. Modern life worships stimulation instead of meaning, and so the human psyche starves quietly beneath the surface. It's why people can have everything and still feel nothing. Jung believed that the loss of meaning is the most common form of modern suffering, a psychological famine. But he also believed that spiritual awakening is born from this hunger. When all external meanings collapse, the self begins to whisper, "You were never empty. You were simply full of noise." That whisper is the first spark of inner alchemy, the transformation of despair into depth. You realize that the void is not against you. It's inviting you inward, into stillness, into surrender, into the quiet intelligence of the unconscious mind that's been waiting for you to stop searching outside and start listening within. To leave this room, you don't escape it, you kneel in it. You let the silence baptize you until it turns into sound again, not the sound of distraction, but of truth. And when you rise, you feel lighter, not because you found new meaning, but because you finally remembered that the power of the mind lies not in what it knows, but in what it can hold, even when there are no answers left. You've walked through every door, the mirrors, the silence, the storms of thought. But this one feels different. It doesn't call you, it waits for you. There's no golden light leaking from beneath it, only darkness, absolute and uninviting. And yet, you know this is the one that matters. This is the room of the shadow, the final threshold in the architecture of the human psyche. Carl Jung called the shadow the thing a person has no wish to be. It's the sum of everything you've rejected, every impulse, fear, envy, secret, and wound you've disowned to protect your image. But the truth is, what you repress doesn't die. It becomes powerful, because it operates in the dark, unseen, shaping your choices, your relationships, even your idea of God. When you step inside, it's not empty. It's full of faces. They look like you, but older, younger, twisted, wounded, versions you buried to survive. The perfectionist, the jealous one, the one who lied, the one who was afraid. They surround you, not with hatred, but with longing, the longing to be acknowledged. This is the place where light and darkness are no longer enemies, but parts of the same whole. Here, the individuation process reaches its core. You cannot ascend without first descending. In Jungian psychology, this is not a metaphor. It's the fundamental law of inner alchemy. The gold of the soul is forged from the lead of suffering. The repressed self must be integrated, not exorcised. You begin to see how projection and perception have shaped your life, how the traits you despised in others were actually hidden parts of you. The shadow in relationships has whispered through every argument, every infatuation, every disappointment. You realize that you never truly saw others. You only saw the reflection of your own unfinished work. The room feels infinite now, not because it's vast, but because it mirrors you completely. You are both the observer and the observed, the wound and the healer, the sinner and the saint. This is what Jung meant when he said, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." To meet that stranger is the beginning of self-awareness, the birth of wholeness. Then something shifts. You don't fight the darkness, you breathe it in. It doesn't consume you, it joins you. The anger becomes strength. The shame becomes empathy. The fear becomes vision. You experience, for the first time, the alchemy of trauma, the transformation of pain into consciousness. And in that moment, the room begins to dissolve. Not because you've escaped it, but because you've integrated it. You understand now. There was never an enemy behind the door. There was only your reflection, waiting to be loved enough to return home. When you step back into the corridor, it's no longer dark. The doors are gone, because once you've met your shadow, there's nowhere left to hide, and nowhere you cannot go. In the end, every door you opened wasn't about fear, it was about awareness. Each one led you closer to the same realization, that the darkness inside you was never your enemy. It was your teacher. This is what Carl Jung called the path of individuation, when the shadow and the self stop fighting, and the mind finally becomes whole. You don't escape the unconscious, you learn to walk through it with light. If this journey spoke to something inside you, stay. Subscribe to Hidden Mind and keep exploring the depths of Jungian psychology, shadow work, and inner transformation with us. Leave a like if you felt that pull toward understanding yourself on a deeper level. It helps this message reach others walking the same path. And tell me in the comments, which door felt most familiar to you? Your reflection might become someone else's awakening, because awareness shared is light multiplied. And the more of us who dare to look within, the brighter this world becomes.